probably the most pressing issue currently right now is what Dr. Stein, you've already addressed somewhat, but we want to take a little bit more focus on that now, on what's going on in Gaza and the horrific genocide. And I'm gonna hand it over to Nick Cruz here from Revolutionary Blackout Network.
All right, thank you. So, do you guys understand that more children was killed in Gaza in the last what 7, 8 months now? Actually, I'm gonna say 5 because this is when I got the data point because it's way worse now. So in the first 5 months of Gaza, more children was killed in the last 5 years of all wars combined. All wars combined. So we're speaking at Kansas University, KU, bring back memories. You know, people in Gaza, they have no university to go to. Israel wiped them all out. What was once considered off limits, hospitals. Barack Obama drone strike the hospital once and they went on an apology tour for a week. Now you have in Gaza, Israel wipe out the entire medical infrastructure in Gaza. And we are living in a society that's pretending this is normal. We have the International Criminal Court. It's rumored that they are going to issue an arrest warrant on Benjamin Netanyahu. The response of the Biden administration and the United States government is to threaten the International Court of Justice with sanctions and throwing their weight to protect a genocidal regime. And as all this is happening, we have young people seeing how lawless our government is becoming hitting the streets. And we are being met with a massive police state that is retaliating with massive force. And they also train with the IDF as well. Just what a coincidence. So we have the ruling class that is rebelling against the concept of international law. Do you want to know what I find to be beautiful in a way, since we're talking about something a little bit negative? We have South Africa, who challenged Israel in the West in the International Court of Justice. Now, think about the lawyers, the judges, the legal team for South Africa. What did they grow up under? They grew up under apartheid, supported by the United States and the West, that was bankrolled and supported by Israel. So think about what's more inspiring than this. You have children that grew up under apartheid, under immense poverty and oppression, who then learned Western law. They learned the rules that the West created. They mastered the law. These are not the rules that they made. These are the rules that the Western imposed on the global South. They mastered the law, and now they took the West and Israel to court, and now that court found that they were plausibly committing a genocide. You want to know what the reaction of the United States was? There was a bill that they sent to Congress where they're now evaluating the relationship we have with South Africa because we are holding Israel accountable. So as they call students and young people who I have great admiration for, Gen Z is deeply motivational. Right now, you have what is even called the liberal media calling these people terrorist sympathizers, as our entire ruling class is rebelling against the concept of international law, where they will say, well, Israel is justified in doing what they're doing because of October 7th. We can ignore the reports that came out that show the IDF murdered more Israeli citizens. We can ignore that. Let's bring up the fact that under international law, there is no exception for revenge. So even if we was to accept the arguments that you guys are making against Hamas, that does not give the United States and Israel the right to commit massive human rights violations and break international law. Collective punishment is a war crime. So when you hear Israeli officials, even we covered Lindsey Graham, we covered many people in Congress that said we need to dispel the notion that there's an innocent Palestinian. I want you guys to understand that when someone does that, they are advocating for terrorist ideology. And I know that you probably had a lot to say, so I'm gonna pass to you here soon. But do you guys understand? I'm gonna put it like this: how will you guys define a terrorist? I've been begging people to use the words the way they're meant to be used. A terrorist is someone who believes that they should be able to have the right to take out the enemy without regards to international law. A terrorist is someone who believes they have the right to take out their enemy and there are no red lines. Now, I'm gonna ask you guys, have CNN, MSNBC, or anyone else ever defined what a terrorist is? So according to Israeli logic, because of October 7th, they have the right to bomb hospitals, they have the right to bomb schools, they have the right to put military-aged men in concentration camps where they are now suffering right now, all because they suffer October 7th. This alone is a war crime. Using starvation as a tool of war is a war crime. The Biden administration had a statement where they said that Israel is now considering letting aid into Gaza. And I don't know if the geniuses in the Biden administration understood that that was a sentence of guilt. Because if they're allowing aid to go into Gaza, that means it was blocking it, which is using starvation as a tool of war. Now I'm gonna get Jill Stein here, because if you're wondering why all this insanity is happening, it's because we have a lobby called AIPAC. And AIPAC, I covered this on my show, sent out a tweet bragging about how 40 out of the 40 of the candidates that they endorsed, meaning bankrolled, won their elections. And now we know studies show in the United States, you can predict an election at around a 97 to 98% success rate based on who's raised the most money. Very great democracy that we have here. So what the AIPAC and what a lot of these billionaires do, they bankroll pro-Israeli, pro-genocide candidates, and they have completely taken over our Congress, every single last one of them, including people who pretend to be progressive, like John Fetterman, who's taken hundreds of thousands of dollars from AIPAC. So I would love to hear from Jill Stein, because what I want to direct to you is, what is the biggest challenge regarding challenging this AIPAC and this Zionist lobby? And that just scratches the surface, because we are just talking about AIPAC. We're not talking about individual donors. I know the name they don't want you to say, George Soros. You guys know that he donated $128 million in the last election. He's a Zionist. He supports the genocide in Gaza. And I know George Soros pays way more than everyone else. But if you look at the top 10, Zionist, 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 and Zionist. So how do we address this hijacking of our democracy, Stein? Thank you for your patience.
Great. Thank you for your really powerful commentary. And I loved what you had to say about the kind of the ironic justice now of South Africa, growing up under apartheid, now upholding, international law as they were taught as good students of Western law. There are just so many ironies here that it is South Africa that is holding the apartheid of today to account. That's really so inspirational. I see in many ways the genocide in Gaza as the tip of the iceberg of US empire. And Ronald Reagan's Secretary of Defense, Caspar Weinberger, kind of summarized it in the 1980s when he said, Israel is the unsinkable battleship of the United States in the Middle East. And then you pair that up with the recent description of US military policy, really US foreign policy, which goes by the name full spectrum dominance. It's this notion, excuse me. Sorry, fighting a cold here. That the US will dominate all spheres of the globe, all potential areas of conflict, economic, military, land, that we will have predominance over land, sea, undersea, air, cyberspace, outer space, that we will dominate all spheres of potential conflict, and we will prevent any competitor from rising, even at a regional level, that we will have complete domination and control. And, so Israel is our partner in this, a strategic outpost to control the oil supply in the Middle East. And back in the 80s, we needed that oil. Now we are the biggest exporter of oil. So we don't need it for ourselves, but we need to control it if we are going to remain, thank you so much. If we're going to remain the, empire of the world. And let me just say that we no longer are actually the empire of the world. We think we are, We think we are the monopolar, dominant power. And this is why we're running into conflicts all over the world, because we think we still have control, but we don't. And the economic curves have crossed, so that the U.S. is falling well below the rising power of, the BRICS Association and, Brazil, Russia, India, China, Korea, South Africa, and now some of the Middle Eastern countries. So we are no longer the bully in the schoolyard, but we're still acting like we're the bully in the schoolyard. This has to be challenged. Here, the American people already don't like it. I mean, the American people reliably on polls, unless we are intimidated and misled into thinking that we're under attack, the American people don't want to be spending half of our congressional dollars on this endless war machine. And in fact, the cost to us this year alone for this endless war machine, that is the Pentagon expenditures, of which Israel is a piece, it's a substantial piece, and the affiliated conflicts, because it's expanded, way beyond just Israel and Gaza. The total cost there is $12,000 for the average household. This year alone, it's $50,000 since the post 9/11 wars have begun. What for? Wars for weapons of mass destruction that did not exist, and it's basically one rationale after another for embroiling us in more of these just fruitless, needless wars. Zionism needs to be, what should we say? This is a big wake-up moment.
It is.
For a lot of Jews. I grew up Jewish, being taught what all Jews are taught, which is that Israel, brought democracy to the Middle East. This was a land without people and a people without a land. So there were declassification of historic documents relating to the founding of Israel. That only began to take place in the 1990s. And there was a whole new generation of historians led by Ilan Pappé, who is really one of the foremost Israeli historians now, who then began this reexamination of Israel. And they began to challenge the mythology that Israel belongs to the Jews. And they really clarified that, well, actually, Palestine historically was a multicultural, multi-religious, peaceful place. And the Jews who were there long ago, they were basically driven out by the Zionists, and they will report also. So the super Orthodox rabbis who fled to Brooklyn to escape the Zionists, they will tell you that conflict came with the Zionists. It came with this notion that we are going to take over this land, we are going to steal it, we will kill in order to get it. In fact, the super Orthodox rabbis say that Zionism is anti-Jewish. Yes. When asked why is it anti-Jewish, what they say is that it defies the basic tenets of Judaism as laid out in the 10 Commandments, namely, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill. So Zionism has actually been controversial within the Jewish religion since its origins in the 1800s. And it's only recently that it has become acceptable and fashionable, and then a controlling power within Jewish institutions. It took a long time to get there, and it needs to be reexamined now in a big way because, the other thing from this historic revelations, these declassified documents, it showed that there actually was a terror plan on the part of Israel at its founding. And there was an intentional plan to kill, murder, displace, etc., Palestinians and clear the land, not only in what was declared to be the province of Israel, but beyond that as well, so that Gaza and the West Bank and other territories could also be appropriated. So it's an extremely disturbing disclosure for people who've been raised to think that this land belonged to them. And as someone who grew up in the 60s, I was born in 1950, so I really saw the civil rights movement emerge. It was the same thing. Yeah. People did not want to have this conversation. There was enormous resistance to it. Its leaders, whether it was Malcolm X or Martin Luther King, they were vilified, criminalized, etc., disparaged. So this is a tough conversation, but it needs to be had. It needs to be had, especially on campuses, and the dependence of campuses on war contractors, on large donors, itself is a travesty and is a betrayal of the obligations of a democracy to have a free education system that can actually, present the liberal ideals of education. That is, actually have debate and dialogue and differences of opinion. But when you have controlling donors or controlling contracts with Boeing or whoever in the military industrial complex, this really compromises our education and the function of universities. And the fact that these encampments that express our right to free speech, our right to protest, and our right to express what the rest of the world is saying and what the International Court of Justice is saying and what Americans are saying in polls, which is that this genocidal war is absolutely unacceptable. There needs to be an immediate ceasefire and a diplomatic solution. The fact that the universities are clamping down on that is an outrage. So at any rate, I think, I've covered some of the issues here. I think there's a discussion that needs to be had. And this is, to my mind, this is the rational position. That's what unless you fight power. That is what Frederick Douglass said way back in the 1800s. Truer than ever. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. That's why we are struggling to get on the ballot, because we are the only anti-war, anti-genocide, pro-worker, climate emergency campaign that is on track to be on the ballot. If we are on the ballot, there will be one of us. Bless their hearts. There are other independent candidates, and I don't mean Robert F. Kennedy, but there are others, Claudia de la Cruz and Cornel West, who have the same agendas. Really, it's identical. What's different is that the Greens actually have a grassroots network. We are a decentralized organization, and the different state parties have maintained their ballot access. So we were well ahead of the game, even before the election started. So we can get on the ballot. They can't. Cornel West says, for example, in Texas, that he will try to do a write-in campaign. This is why it's very hard to run solo. You actually need people who have fought this battle many times to learn how to fight it, because unfortunately, or it will be unfortunate news when Dr. West learns that you can't do a write-in campaign in Texas. You can write somebody in, but it won't get counted. A write-in campaign doesn't work in Texas. You actually need to be on the ballot in Texas. So that's just an example of why the other campaigns are not going to get on. The Claudia de la Cruz will get on. They do have a grassroots network. They will get on in some states. It's mostly the smaller states. So you're not going to have enough momentum to actually challenge power unless you're pretty much on every state, especially the big ones. So we are the only campaign that can do that. And we can tell people, that this war is over. The minute we turn the White House into a greenhouse, the war is over. And U.S. aid for an apartheid and murderous apartheid state is over and done. So, fundamentally, how we solve this problem is by challenging power and by asserting our rights of democracy to have a government that is responsive to the needs and the wishes of the American people. And it's really all of our needs and wishes are being violated. It's not only that this is an outrage against basic human values, human rights. It's also that we here in America are paying to the teeth and being endangered by the expanding war, the potential to go nuclear here. But we are very much being impoverished. We spent in one bill 5 times what it would cost to end homelessness in this country. So this is an abomination, and we can fix it. And that's why we are fighting to remove the war criminals from the positions that they occupy currently, holding our future in their hands. They need to be removed from power as quickly as possible.
If you don't mind, I just want to add something else regarding Zionism, because I love the bravery you're showing by taking that on head on, because if it's something that's been a weakness on the left, this is a moment for us to educate people on this issue. America, despite what you hear on corporate media, is way behind on this. Like when you look around the world, the world population has turned against Israel a very, very long time ago. It's through authoritarianism and the veto power of the United States. That's the only thing keeping Israel safe. Now let's talk about Zionism. I'll be real quick. I know we're limited on time, but let's talk about Zionism and what it means. The idea of Zionism was to create self-determination for the Jewish people, to create a Jewish state. The idea of Zionism was that the ideology and the practice of Zionism will help keep Jewish people safe. How well is that going?
Yeah, not at all.
So Zionism enables the worst form of antisemitism that we can see. Because what they tell people is that all Jews is loyal to the state of Israel. So you have Israel that then commits massive war crimes in the name of Judaism. So if you're someone who's not as well informed as many people here, and they tie Judaism and Jewish people with what the state is doing, that is what leads to anti-Semitism. You want to know what also leads to anti-Semitism? When you have a Catholic, our president is Catholic. Our president, Joe Biden, who is a Catholic, called the students who are protesting against Israel a bunch of anti-Semites. That's essentially what he said. Now let's think about how ridiculous this is. A large amount of those students that are protesting are Jewish. Now let's sit back and analyze what just happened here. We had a Catholic that told a bunch of Jewish people that they are anti-Semitic because they didn't support the Catholic sending bombs to the fascist Jewish people to bomb Muslims and Christians in the Holy Land. Does that make sense at face value when it's explained like that? So what does this lead to? This leads to a situation where Jewish people have their freedom of speech essentially removed because a lot of Jewish people who oppose, they are peace-loving people because Judaism does not equal Zionism. So they oppose the state of Israel and the apartheid state of Israel, and then they are likely retaliated against. They are smeared, and this is repeated even in the corporate news. They are called self-hating Jews. They are attacked. They are fired for their jobs, despite being Jewish, because they are, the implication is that they are Jewish people that are secretly helping terrorists. Do you guys see how this ideology don't only make Jewish people physically less safe, but it leads to them having decreased rights, the lack of freedom of speech? And I'm not even going to the pressures that they face within the community. So supporting Zionism is the highest form of anti-Semitism. I don't know if you have anything else you want to comment on it, but I love that you speak out on it because it's a very insidious ideology that because of pressure and because of the authoritarianism of Zionism, where they weaponize capital, we've seen stories of teachers being fired. This is not new, guys. We're seeing people in professional. I know a lot of people in my personal life that have been fired for speaking up against a genocide. This is the definition of authoritarianism. We're seeing the authoritarian tendencies of capital at play. Anyway, I know we're low on time, so you guys know me. I can run on this all day, so I'll pass it to you guys.
Yeah, no, I love everything that you said, and it reminds me of what I feel like as a Jew. Every time someone says that opposing genocide is anti-Semitic, what is that saying? If opposing genocide is anti-Semitic, like these encampments that are opposing genocide, they're anti-Semitic. What that says is that supporting genocide is Jewish, that it's Jewish to support genocide. When you say that it is anti-Semitic to oppose genocide, that to me is the most anti-Semitic thing anybody could possibly say. And so it feels like it's time for us to sit down and kind of come into the 21st century about what Zionism is, because what many of us were taught as Jews, what we grew up believing, our hope for the future. You know, I grew up after the Holocaust. My grandparents had fled pogroms in Eastern Europe. My grandfather's name was Israel before the state was named, but there was a lot of family identification with this project. And I never quite understood it myself, to tell you the truth, but there was a lot of Zionism around me. And, you know, it was like a rude awakening that, oh my God, it isn't like this. This is the land of milk and honey. I don't know if you remember the song, but this was a song celebrating Israel. This is the land of milk and honey. This is the, I don't remember how the next line goes, but you know, it was a lovely, captivating song about what a wonderful place the kibbutz is and how wonderful Israel is. And to like start learning that it's not that, you know, and that there was all this intentional destruction and murder and assaults on villages. And, you know, I don't know all the details of it yet myself. I haven't had time to kind of study that part of history on the fly here, but it's there. And, you know, the more I look into it, kind of the more really compelling it is. And I would share the name Ilan Pappé, who was the, you know, Miko Peled would also give you another version of this, sort of summarizing it. Miko Peled, the author, who is the son of one of the leading generals with the founding of the state of Israel, who also began to kind of help re-educate people, or educate people, I guess, because there was so much false information that was used to support the unsinkable battleship of the US in the Middle East. And it's a foundational pillar for the excesses of empire. And another like final comment on this is that the US, as Gaza goes, we all go, because Gaza is where the torture and murder of children on an industrial scale is being normalized. It's where international law is being dismantled. For us to allow this to happen has enormous implications for all of us for the future. The alternative to international law is the law of the jungle. You know, the US calls it a rules-based order, but it's the rules that they make up day by day. It's not written down. It hasn't been, you know, arrived at through any consensus process. But international law, there was a lot of care and thought put into it. It's not perfect, especially the UN, which badly needs major, you know, major surgery on the UN. But international law is a body of law. Otherwise, it really is the law of the jungle, and the US is no longer the dominant power. So if we don't want to be abused and really beat up on the world stage, it's time to get with the program and, you know, improve international law. But we got to start with where we are. We can't just be the bully in the china shop, especially when we're no longer, you know, the bully here or I should say the bully in the schoolyard. We can't pretend to be that anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stein. We're gonna open it up for questions from the audience. I do want to ask one thing though, because I don't think we quite touched on it yet. And if you would like to comment on this or tell the story, because about what happened in St. Louis just a few days ago.
Sure. Yeah. Oh yeah. We had done a campaign event at the public library, which was a few blocks away. And there were some amazing students there from the encampment who were talking about their encampment in the course of our meeting. It was really powerful. And another student who wasn't like part of a delegation to that meeting, another student came up to us afterwards and asked us if we wanted to come to the encampment just to show support for it. And we said, sure, of course, you know, we think this is really critical stuff. So we came, and once we got there, then the students who were there asked us, would we please go talk with the administrators and see if we could help de-escalate things, because they, you know, reported that the cops had been called out. So I myself and two of the representatives to their the city board, the aldermen, 2 aldermen were there, including the president of the board of aldermen. So they went also to try to talk to the administrators, and they basically, you know, didn't have much impact. They sort of held off for a couple of hours, during which time the students asked us, would we please come and join their lineup, in the hopes that if we were at the front of the line, we would help prevent the police from, you know, trying to arrest us. And it didn't. And in fact, cops seemed to be targeting me. I can't say that for sure, but they were carrying bicycles.
Oh, they definitely are.
Okay.
Yeah, they did. I was there.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So, and they were also, they raised their bikes up, you know, so it's not like they were moving their bikes. They were, you know, really assaulting me. And we were linked arms. So it was hard to break through. And they were basically pushing me over. If you see in the video, you can see that I was pushed back like this. I was like at a 45-degree angle, and with a bicycle on top of me. And at that point, the cop picked up my right foot to flip me over backwards underneath the bike. And I was able to like jerk my foot out because I didn't want to fall on my head. I happen to have osteoporosis of my neck, so I was not anxious to break my neck. And I was able to jerk my foot away. And he then informed me that I was under arrest for assaulting him. And, you know, I got knocked down, turned over, cuffed on the ground, and then walked over to the paddy wagon where Kelly arrived before me, after me, I don't know, but there's also a lot of vivid footage of them throwing her around like a rag doll. I mean, I'm just amazed we didn't really break a lot of bones. Jason got beat up, but I guess he's okay.
4 or 5 of them would take me down.
And we were in very good company for most of the time because they arrested everybody there. It was about 100 people who got arrested. And we were all in the jail cells being processed together. But then at the end, when we thought we were getting out, I got diverted. And I then went a different pathway, and there was nobody there. It was just me. And then eventually I found another gentleman who had also been charged with assault. and there's footage of him too. He was a professor of Middle East Studies from the University of Illinois. He was just taking pictures. He was just live streaming or maybe just making a video. And he was attacked, brutally attacked by several cops who knocked him down, flipped him over, cuffed him, and then dragged him by his feet on the ground. And he was really roughed up. And so it was just, and he was charged with assault. So it was just him and me that were separated off from everybody else, which is a little bit alarming. And then we were processed as if we were being admitted. And, we had kind of the medical consultations, had to give urine specimens, and it looked like we were going to be admitted to the jail. And then without, and fingerprinted and everything. And then, and photographed to get our mugshots. And then suddenly they said, okay, now you go through that door. And that door was like how to get outside. And they gave our belongings. They took our, like earrings and necklace. They collected everything from us. And I don't think that was done with everybody else. You guys didn't. Yeah. So that was done with us. Like we were going to jail. And then, yeah, it certainly seemed that way.
Yeah, because we identified ourselves. The students asked us to intercede on their behalf.
Yeah. So they knew who we were. The
Yeah.
cops knew who we were.
Yeah.
And, we were trying to appeal to them. We told them we're live streaming this to the world right now. You're on a presidential candidate platform. Are you going to do this, in front of the eyes of the world? And yes, they were. And they wanted to make us pay. And so I'm now facing assault charges. I can't believe they will hold up. They're just so ludicrous because there it is, it's on live film. And to my mind, this is why we cannot just sort of be passive here. This is fascism. We don't need to wait for Donald Trump, for fascism to arrive. There is no greater, trademark of fascism than committing genocide, and Joe Biden has, been leading the charge on genocide. So fascism is here by every indicator. It's, within our police forces that are being trained by the IDF or the IOF, the Israeli Occupation Forces. This is really a pretty scary situation, and I just have so much respect and admiration for the young people who are really putting themselves and their futures and their careers and their education on the line. And, this takes me back to the 1960s and then the 1970s. And this is a continuing battle. The empire and oligarchy are inseparable. In the words of Martin Luther King, this is the triple evil of militarism, materialism, and racism. Materialism being predatory capitalism. The three are joined at the hip. But it's a perfect storm right now to challenge that empire that is destroying our future. It's clear what our trajectory is right now. The chickens have come home to roost long since, and the war machine, has turned on us. And it's really important to fight it off because it doesn't have the numbers. It doesn't have the moral authority. It does not have American values. As Alice Walker said, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. We do have power, and this is the time to assert that power. The oligarchy has appointed, 2 zombie candidates to represent it. And that is really appropriate. You have zombie political parties represented by zombie candidates that the public abhors. It's as if this is, a perfect scenario right now for challenging power and for unifying the principled opposition for people, planet, and peace over profit. And that's what our campaign represents. There couldn't be a better time to stand up and fight back and demand the future that we deserve, a future that works for all of us here in America and around the world. Our futures are really inseparable. So it's time to stand up. We have nothing to lose but our chains. Thank you.
Look at Jill being humble. Look at Jill being humble. You ever seen these white liberals that put Black Lives Matter in their profile? Palestinian flag, now they're doing activism. You know what we asked for at Revolutionary Blackout? What's the greatest act of allyship? Is actually putting your body on the line. So Jill being real humble right now, but we need 1,000 Jills. There's a lot of people that put hashtag Black Lives Matter, and that's all it takes. No, that's exactly what we need, and that's why I'm probably not voting for you, because that's what is no talk. Like, it's game time right now, and we don't want it to happen, but this is the reality of what my community been dealing with for decades and decades.
Oh, yeah.
And seeing, especially someone like Dr. Jill Stein, like in a sane society, do you guys realize the headline run everywhere? Rival to President Joe Biden arrested for opposing his genocide. That's the main story for at least a week in a sane society.
Yeah.
So, but that said, you've been very humble because it cannot be understated how brave that is to put your body out on the line, especially as someone who's challenging genocide Joe himself. So, much respect to you, and I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. Thanks. I want to open up for questions, but real quick, I want to give a chance for Ella and Grant to say some other words if you guys would like to. Otherwise, we can just open it up to the audience for questions. Would you guys like to say anything else?
Well, I would like to speak on a couple of things really quickly. I am also Jewish, and I grew up going to a Reform temple.
Oh, yeah.
Very,
Yeah.
I would say, light interaction with my faith. I am in Kansas, and so that there's not a lot of other Jewish people to be around to share experiences with. And so one of the things even in my Reform temple, I was told was the moment that Israel lays down its arms, it will be attacked and it will be destroyed.
Yeah.
And ultimately, time and time again, it seems like they're the ones holding the most arms and aiming them more than other countries in the region. And I still have to have these conversations with my family. I had one on Sunday, and it's very difficult. And there's a lot of internal pressures from my own community. Whereas I come to my college campus and I find a lot of support for different types of ideas. And then there are so many layers to being a Jewish person in America, and many of them are erased by either side of the spectrum, including my own community, as well as those who have no love for our community. So I would say thank you for being a Jewish voice on a national scale when there are few that I feel I can look to.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. And then also thank you for recognizing what it is that is motivating young people to engage in politics right now, and trying to hold on to that and say, I am listening. This is what I recognize as your primary concern. So that is where I will meet you, as opposed to sticking with what is generally been white liberal politics of yes, I care about the environment, but that is not the only issue I care about. And I'm not going to choose environment over justice.
Yeah, great.
So thank you.
Wonderful.
All right. Well, does anybody in the audience have a question for Dr. Stein? Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Nick. Nice to formally meet you. I voted for you in 2016. I'm
All right.
very excited to do so again.
Oh, thank you.
And before I ask my questions, I just wanted to say, as badass as your arrest story was, it's made that much cooler with the detail that you apparently tapped into Ultra Instinct to evade police catastrophic.
I appreciate that
damage. So,
reference.
very impressive. I have 4 questions. I'm going to keep them very succinct. I'm so sorry. But so first off, for me, I feel like the lie kind of at the heart of our capitalist system is this idea of every company or interest or profit-based motive is based on this premise that infinite growth can happen on a planet with finite resources. That's something that I've just personally concluded is both insane and also just kind of by design destined to collapse and fail at some point, which is why I've ultimately come to the conclusion that degrowth as a societal goal makes a lot more sense. And I wanted to know if that was compatible with your vision of climate policy. My second question, this one's a bit convoluted, but to me, the idea of people's unwillingness to vote third party is like the idea of, I don't know if you're familiar with the Monty Hall paradox. There was a game show, let's make a deal, door number 1, door number 2, door number 3. There's a fabulous prize between one door and gag gifts behind the other. Contestant picks a door, host who has objective measure of where all the items are, displays another door that a gag gift is behind. It gives the audience member a chance to switch choices or stay with the original one. Even though there's countless mathematical models that show that you're statistically more likely to win by switching, people overwhelmingly stick with their original choice. Part of the psychological reasoning behind it that people have concluded is because there's 2 things in effect. The bandwagon effect, where people just double down on their initial choice, even if they get compelling evidence that switching would be better for them overall. And then also the concept of loss aversion, that people are more scared to lose something than they are excited to try to win something. And I think that this is kind of an apt metaphor too, if only because I feel like people in power right now, the media, the political parties have a very clear objective understanding of what the world of possibilities are, but through obfuscation or fear manipulate people into making choices on their terms rather than people's own. And I just wanted to know if you had considered any other psychological barriers that stop otherwise good people from making a choice that would benefit them, like voting third party. My third question is, I really want you to get into the debate stage. I know that the threshold to do that is 15% in national average polling. Me, since I became an adult, I have never been polled for anything political in my life. I wanted to know if you were aware of any proactive steps that anyone could make to be considered in those polls, if you're aware of any. And then finally, my final question is, of all the libel and slander and thought-terminating cliches that people peddle endlessly to try to make people not listen to you or support or vote for you, which do you personally find to be the funniest?
Okay, those are really great questions.
Thank
You know, the issue of infinite growth and, degrowth. You know, absolutely, this is true. You know, you can't infinitely grow the economy or anything on a finite planet. And exactly what form that is going to take, I don't know. And I'm actually not aware of how that's been integrated into the Green New Deal yet, except to say that, conservation and efficiency are really the primary tool, and also kind of re-examining, how our lives work. And, we need to get places by, physical, actual, walking and biking and things like that, that are way more energy efficient, and they're really good for our health and really good for air quality and all that. So there are efficiencies that we can use, and whether you call it degrowth or whether you just call it conservation and efficiency, it's a question. But there's also this related question about what is it that gives value to our lives? Is it by having more and more material things, or is it by having richer, relationships? And, to my mind, art and culture and music and dance are really critical. And it's like the glue of society that's been lost here in the shuffle. And in my experience, and also watching the movements over the course of my lifetime, it's really kind of the arts that glue us together and that really solidify our communities. And I think I see that as really part and parcel of this vacuousness that, our cultural spaces have been hijacked by corporations now, and we don't have places for community, for artistic self-expression and artistic community connection. So I see that very much as kind of the answer to this desire for infinite expansion and wealth. And I think it reflects kind of a, arrested development, kind of the incapacitated human development of people who become oligarchs, and who become billionaires, and for whom the pursuit of infinite wealth, you can never have enough because there's so much emptiness internally because one isn't kind of connected in a human community. So I think these things are very much, these dots connect. So exactly what form that takes, I'm not sure yet, but I think we are going to have an evolving conversation here. And if we can get to the point where we win the White House and turn it into a greenhouse, you've got a lot of bully pulpit from that position, and you have a great chance to really help educate and empower people to a future that actually works for all of us. And I also want to comment there that our goal is to make, the occupant of the White House not just the commander-in-chief, but the organizer-in-chief, so that we can actually mobilize people to be the driver of policy change. We won't have it. I mean, we have some great candidates, and I want to recognize Jason Call over there, our campaign manager, who is a congressional candidate in Washington's 2nd District, and Kelly Merrill, also our deputy campaign manager, who's not a candidate, but I want to just call out Kelly as well. There are great candidates out there that could be elected into Congress, so we actually could have people to drive policy in Congress, but the real driver of policy needs to be grassroots in our communities. And the institution of town hall meetings has been basically gone into the dustbin, and elected officials need to be instructed by their communities and need to meet with them face to face. So things that people don't understand right now, we may come to a place of greater understanding in the future. Right now, most people think of degrowth as a very scary and threatening thing. So I think we need to kind of move to a place where we understand more what's the price we pay if we continue to grow the economy without end. So I see this as a continuing conversation with a lot of potential here for the right thing to happen. On third-party voting, yeah, I mean, in my experience, fear has so much to do with why people won't vote third parties, and they get very manipulated. If we had ranked choice voting or proportional representation, this issue of the split vote and having some unintended consequence or supposedly throwing away your vote, to my mind, those are all really mythologies, because most third-party votes come from people who otherwise won't vote at all. They're staying home. So this is all about empowering people. But yeah, it's hard to overcome it. And the question is, how much of a crisis does it take to overcome that kind of fear-mongering? And we'll have to see. But all the polls suggest that we are in a completely unprecedented place right now, and that there's a real potential to overcome that, especially if we have 3 candidates dividing the pro-war vote. If you have a 4-candidate race, the race can be won with as little as 26% of the popular vote. So there's a huge incentive here if people really understand that this is potentially a winnable election. There are many ways to win the day. Even if you don't win the White House, you have to get started at some point. And from that benefit alone, I think it's, there's every reason to stand up and make our demands politically. Silencing yourself is not a political strategy. And that's what you do if you're just voting for the lesser evil, if you're sticking for what you've got. So it's going to take a lot of educating ourselves and each other to have the courage of our convictions. And that's what we're kind of seeing now on the campuses across the country, spreading like a wildfire. So it remains to be seen, but to my mind, it's a reason to get out and mobilize, because if we don't shoot for it, if we don't aim for what's possible, then we can be sure we're going to stay on this trajectory towards self-destruction, which is clearly where we are right now. And let's see, debate stage. I don't think they're going to hold debates, no matter what. I mean, they're not holding debates right now. If you achieve their threshold, they'll change the threshold. So, we challenged RFK to a debate on Israel, and of course he's declining. So I'm not hopeful, but Free and Equal, which is a kind of alternative organization, they are holding debates right now. It's mostly libertarians, Greens, and socialists that are having that debate. And that's a really interesting debate and a great format. It doesn't get a lot of attention, but it's there and it's happening. And you can go check them out at freeandequal.org, I think. And I don't remember, was there another question?
What's of all the lies that people
Oh.
spread about you all the time, which one do you think is the most common?
It's hard to say. I guess, I think people who fall victim to the Russian asset smear, I find extremely entertaining and sad, kind of sad for those people who are so victimized by this propaganda of powerlessness, this propaganda that tells you you can't think for yourself, you have to be good little boys and girls and just keep voting for more of the same. And here are all the the fake concocted smear campaigns that tell you why you have to do it. So hopefully, I mean, they've cried wolf here so many times, and I've run for office enough that I don't think they're going to come up with anything new here. So hopefully it will all go into the dustbin, and we'll get past it, into an entirely different new chapter of history whose time has come. So thank you. Thanks very much.
Just to entertain you a little bit for a second, we did get a question from some guy who ran as a progressive Democrat for Congress some years past, commented on our Twitter post to promote this event, asking if Putin would be zooming in. He is not. But just an example of that.
Tell him his checks.
Ask him to stop bombing Ukraine.
Good.
I'm sorry, I missed most of this time, but I'm wondering about, does anyone know if anyone is using depleted uranium shells in Ukraine? They talked about it a lot early in Iraq and 22 years ago. And I was amazed. I think they think it's not a biological, a chemical, or a nuclear weapon. I think it's all three, but I think by definitions, they somehow convinced themselves that it's conventional weapons. And because I just got reminded today, I heard something that I tend to believe Ukraine now is the most heavily mined part of the world with landmines and stuff in the ocean, I think.
And cluster munitions as well, I think, are also being used in Ukraine.
Are they using?
That's my impression.
uranium?
I believe I did read that depleted uranium is also being sent to Ukraine. I'm not sure. Do
They're
you
using,
know?
I did a video. They're using uranium tank shells.
Yeah.
That stays in the.
Yeah.
I think that's what you guys are talking
Yep,
about.
yep.
Yeah, that's.
Right.
I think
They are
that-
using
yeah,
that. Yes, yeah, that's my impression. I mean, it's just, it's outrageous what's going on in Ukraine in the name of defending democracy. It's disastrous. I mean, to my mind, that's exactly why these war criminals need to be removed from power. They don't have a clue about the danger of nuclear weapons either. They're extremely casual about nuclear weapons and about the potential for them to be used. I mean, they talk about Hiroshima-sized nuclear weapons as now conventional small-grade nukes, and they are small compared to the size of some nukes right now. But, 100,000, 200,000 people just wiped out like that in a moment. That's a conventional weapon. This is a small-grade nuclear exchange. Yeah, I mean, it's a war crime, just the way that they talk and think. They should not be in positions of responsibility.
They literally say, they will say this with out in the open. They will say, "Isn't it great that we have a way to fight Russia without American soldiers dying?"
Yeah.
What? They just say this on TV. So they just sacrifice the entire generation of Ukrainians for a war that can't be won.
Yeah.
So they also claim that Ukraine has to join NATO because if they join NATO, Ukraine would be safe. It was safer before you guys try to join NATO. You guys see how they tell you guys stuff that don't make sense?
Oh, yeah.
But people just repeat it.
Any other questions from the audience? Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
Other than college campuses and the turmoil that rightfully so that's caused there, where is the bullhorn that we can utilize? I know we have Democracy Now!, Pacifica Radio, and a few others, but really we're out of the mainstream of communication with the masses.
So, just to be clear, the masses now widely reject mainstream media. In fact, a poll last year showed that the majority of Americans now believe that mainstream media is purposefully misleading you and lying to you. So it doesn't, to my mind, it's not such a big deal that mainstream media is not covering us. And eventually they will, and they have started covering us now a little bit. By the way, recent polls, we just saw a poll which was done before the protest at WashU. And this was a poll in Wisconsin where we're now at 8%. And among people under 30, we are at 22%. Is that right, Jason? I think it's 22%.
We are at 22% with people under 30 in Wisconsin and 18% at people 30 to 44.
Wow.
We are also at 10% among women and 8% across the board.
And Wisconsin, we spent a couple days in Wisconsin, got a little bit of coverage. We get pretty good coverage from local media, I have to say, when we actually go places, even the mainstream channels that are local. So word is getting out. So this is like even prior to any mainstream media coverage.
And what I was going to say, no, this is before we got arrested.
Yeah,
So,
right, which is where we've had most of our mainstream media coverage. So even before we got arrested, there has been a really rising tide. And Bernie Sanders in 2016, he was bumping along at 2 and 3% for much of his primary before he broke out of it. So this is all still very consistent with, with a pathway that could potentially lead to the White House. RFK proved the principle that you don't need mainstream media in order to break through. There's so much independent media now, the likes of Revolutionary Blackout Network and many others that are willing, and ready and stuff, they've begun to start talking now. So absolutely, this is, it's entirely doable. We don't really need mainstream media. They're kind of struggling to survive right now because they've sort of lost their base. They're aging out. Their base is aging out too. So it's a very fluid media environment. Unfortunately, they're going to take down TikTok by, giving it an American owner, probably some billionaire who will, impose his own form of censorship on it. So this is unfortunate, and it's a moving target, and we just have to keep fighting, but knowing that word gets out, and we have to keep pushing.
Yeah, since I'm in journalism, I guess I can answer this.
Yeah.
If it makes you feel a little bit better, just piggybacking on what Jill Stein is going through right now, and this is probably the only time that you will ever catch me celebrating people being laid off. That would never happen. But we are seeing mass layoffs
That's right.
in among print media, the Washington Post, CNN. Once again, I'm pro worker. I never ever cheer people being laid off until now, because these people are stenographers, propagandists of the highest order, and they lost the faith of the American people for a reason. So now what we are seeing we're seeing something truly incredible happen. Now, to get to the positive part, we're seeing a rise in what I call the golden age of journalism. And people don't know we're in it now because I think people are going to talk about it later. Like, we're in the golden age of journalism. Before corporate media and corporate conglomerates took over and destroyed journalism, journalism used to be a working class profession. I am happily, like, I'm a very humble working class journalist. Like, I feel like a lot of people don't have no idea how much. Like, do you guys know, like, Rachel Maddow made like $50,000 every time you see her in a chair? Journalists used to be ordinary working class people. Now we've seen that return with subscription models because of YouTube streaming. And now that rendered a lot of these corporate media heads irrelevant. I can't get laid off. I have thousands of people who follow my work and will continue to follow my work. The person who is hired at New York Times, when they are laid off, they're done. No one cares about what they say. They're only representative of the brand. And we are seeing more and more layoffs because the billionaire funders who funded all these print media, like the Atlantic, for example, they're pulling their funds because they realized they made a bad investment. And this is only a great thing, guys. The people freak out about this, but we are creating a system of meritocracy where the only way you can grow subscribers, the only way that RBN even exists, if I have integrity.
Yeah.
If I tell people the truth. If you get caught lying, you're done. If you lose if you lose the faith of the people, you're done. With the corporate media, they never care about that because they had donors. Now we are people funded, and now that's making an era of journalism that's holding government accountable, which lead to more awareness on Israel and Palestine, will lead to more protests. So hopefully that gives you guys like more optimism because the old school culture where only the ruling class control the narrative, I think those days are done. But I'll pass it back to you.
Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.